Woohoo! Welcome to our debut podcast of the Ridiculously Human podcast, episode 001.
Gareth, my boy, how's it going?
Gregos, China, I'm very well, man. How about you?
Pretty amazing, man.
That's awesome, bud. I'm really excited about today.
Likewise, it's going to be amazing.
Yeah, I can't wait.
So what we'll do is in a second, we'll go like 1, 2, and then on. So we'll go 1, 2, 3, record. And then we all just like synced up, and then it's super easy to edit afterwards. Alrighty, so this is the part of the show where Gareth and I reflect on some of the broader themes and some of the interesting stuff that we took from our awesome chat with Anna. And one of them was Anna's workshops. And I think the workshops, for me, one of the really cool things that I took from it, chatting to her about that, was the idea that cooking is fun. Cooking is a community affair, and can be really informative and enlightening in a fun way. And I think Anna pulls that off. What do you reckon?
Yeah, I think it's really cool how she talks about how we should have fun with our food, and that you almost learn by playing with your food. And it's something I think like in society today, which we don't really do. Cooking is seen as a chore and as almost like a time waster. And but it's actually something that could be really cool, and you can integrate it into your life as like a social time for the family to touch base, talk about how your day went, and at the same time you all contribute and you all make your meal together and you all learn at the same time.
Yeah, it's a thing that we've been doing for millennia, and these days I feel like we've kind of put it to the wayside, like it's a silly thing. Get on with it. Just, it's become a really sort of functional thing. It's just to fill our tummies and get on with it, instead of making it this really enjoyable time with family. And then also, if you sort of spend that time together, you actually end up enjoying that food more and being more mindful of the food that you're eating. I think that's really pretty cool as well. And one of the other things we also wanted to discuss a little bit was the really sort of massive and controversial topic of the supplement industry. So, yeah, that was quite interesting, don't you reckon?
Yeah, that was really interesting. I mean, Anna's a pro when it comes to protein as a supplement, and I found it really fascinating talking to her, just understanding the history of protein. And personally, I've had like a love, and now not so much love, a relationship with with protein as a supplement. And I've tried every single brand I think there is out there, and I used to use it a lot, but now I've gone back to being much more natural and don't actually have any in my diet. But after speaking to Anna, that is possibly going to change a little bit. So yeah, what were your thoughts?
Yeah, I just thought, whenever I think of protein, I always think of either a shake or meat, and I think she totally destroyed that idea and blew my mind with how many ways there are to eat protein and make it really fun and exciting in doing so. So that was really cool for me.
Yeah, I totally agree. I think there's so much to learn from Anna, and we now invite you just to listen to the podcast with Anna and what it's like for her to be ridiculously human. Good stuff. Yeah, here we are. Cool, man. Hey, Anna, how's it going? How's your day been so far?
Really good, really busy. It starts off really early, and then it kind of gains momentum into a peak mountain, and then you're like, and then you're like, good.
What time do you normally start your day?
5 or 6.
Okay.
And
nice.
Then it kind of goes on. I try to go to the gym in the morning, then I drop off the baby in daycare, nursery. And then, either go to the office, come here, go to London a lot for meetings, and then just kind of tackle the day as it happens.
Yeah. Where are you based exactly now?
So near the University of Sussex in the UK. So it's kind of an hour-ish from London.
Is that like near Gatwick?
It's 20 minutes from Gatwick, so it's really useful. Location-wise, you can just get around.
Okay.
Are you finding that you're having to, you say it's convenient, are you flying around a lot? Are you back and forth with the business?
I mean, mostly taking the train to London a lot and to the north of England a lot as well, but taking some trips to the US and, a lot of travel. It's one of the things that is kind of a bit of a sore spot is that I don't drive, so now it's here. Here it's fine, But then you go to some places in the U.S. visiting, for example, that have the factory really far away, and you have to, get a taxi a lot and get rides. Here in the UK, you can get around really easily on the train, which is fantastic.
So did you decide, like, when you say you don't drive, you decided not to do your license?
Well, I was living in Chicago when I was, the age everybody gets their license at, and I did get one for 6 months. And then I turned 21 and I went to university and I had to renew it, and I just never renewed it. So then I lost it. But that was automatic. It was an automatic car. It's a easier.
That's not real driving anyway.
Well, it's rarer here than it is in the US. So I just thought.
Cool stuff. Cool. Well, thank you so much for joining us. This is actually episode 01 of Ridiculously Human. So, awesome. We couldn't actually think of someone better to have on it. And I guess just to provide a bit of context, like I actually first started following you probably, I think, in 2012. I saw you on like bodybuilding.com. You were posting recipes on there, and I don't know if it was like through like Chris Gethin, because I did one of his programs, and somehow he was like talking about like protein things, and then I searched on their websites, and your name came up, and ever since then I've like basically been following you. I attended, I think, one of your workshops. It was in 2013 in like
really that long ago. Wow.
I think it was that long ago. Yeah. And the cool thing is I actually met a girl there, Rainy. I'm not too sure if you... actually, if I have to pronounce her full name, it's like she's from Iceland. Reagan Hilda...
Yeah, she was lovely. She did she do psychology stuff?
Yes, that's her. Yeah. So we're actually like really, really good friends. And like every time her and her husband come to London, we catch up. So that's really, really cool. And actually, Craig has met her as well.
So
that
was all just from that event. Yeah.
I mean, the cool thing about those cooking workshops is that we get together a bunch of people and we all cook with protein. So we have food in the middle and we go absolutely nuts. And what's really awesome about it is that oftentimes, I don't know if it's the case with you guys, but especially early on, it's less common now, but when you cook a certain way, like functional food and healthy food, but it's really good food, but it's unusual food, you're often the weird one in the sense of, like I remember, all through university, I'd open my Tupperwares and have tiny green pancakes, like lots of them, like dozens. And people would be like, what is that? And I'd be like, it's spinach protein pancakes. And they'd be like, all right. So then they tried one and then they'd be like, oh, this is good actually. But from the beginning, it's a very separate way of eating. So, that goes along with, someone that has a lot of passion for going to the gym and exercising and, doing, exercise amongst a group of friends or family that maybe do it every now and then, but not as passionately and intensely as you do. So then you go to these events, right? And everybody is a weird one like you are, in the sense of everybody gets it. Everybody gets the food. Everybody gets like the passion for the gym, exercise, and eating healthy and nutrition, and they understand protein. So you put all these people together, and it's like, it feels like home, And what's so cool about it is what you were saying, that a lot of people go on to become friends after the event. So we have even some people that have gone on to couple.
Wow, that's cool.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. Yeah, so there's a lot of, I always kind of joke around, we should do like a protein cooking, like dating.
Well, you know what? Like, food is one of those things that is such an important, integral part of like day-to-day life. We all do it, and it's a social thing. And I actually think it's an awesome idea. Like, if you've got that, that's like one of those fundamental things. Is like how, if it's impossible to, or not impossible, but it's not easy to try and date someone that's got like a totally different outlook on the way they eat. And so I think that's actually quite a good place to start. So those workshops, how did you sort of like come up with the idea? Was that part of you trying to like get your ideas out there, or did you just sort of enjoy it and it sort of grew organically from there?
Well, when I started the website and Cooking with Protein and promoting the idea of cooking and everything, there's always, even now, so there's people that maybe see recipes for protein pizza in particular, or protein bars, or protein fluff, and they see them a lot, they understand it, but they've never made it because it's just, protein pizza, you kind of see it, but you're like, maybe I can't do it, or it's too hard, it's complicated, or whatever else. So by doing the workshops and people doing it themselves and being kind of not forced to do it, but doing it in an environment where they can be free to fail, then suddenly they kind of get it in a way that they didn't get it before. And I think it's making that possible. And also just the act of playing with food. So you can see as many recipes as you want, but it's, actually getting your hands dirty with it that gets that other next level going. And yeah, that's kind of what made it happen. I wasn't seeing any courses like that are run in a way that's not, a lot of cooking courses, you go in and they give you like a menu with directions and, not a menu per se, but it's a very structured kind of, do this, cut the onion, add the garlic, blah, blah, blah. Whereas, the workshops we run are, let's go nuts, and there's chocolate and there's like mess, and people like sometimes make things that are like, but that's part of the process. You kind of go through it and you learn and you have fun with people and you kind of, yeah.
Yeah. Are you still
your
doing
little
workshops?
kid must have the best fun in the world just living with you.
We make a lot of stuff.
There you go.
And are you still doing the workshops?
Yeah, so we're doing one next month. We're doing 8 of them in 2 days, actually, in Scotland. So at the SFN Expo, it's Sport, Nutrition and Fitness. It's an expo, and we're going to do a ton of workshops. So, so I do them a lot still, and they're fun. And actually, we did one last year, the BBC Good Food Show, and we catered to 250 people. And what I love the most about it is that we had grandparents, we had kids, we had moms, dads. It's a really kind of, the playing with food element taps into, old, young, and it's just fun. And, you kind of fall in love with healthy ingredients as opposed to seeing them as bland and healthy and sacrificey. Like, you can make healthy food really, really cool.
Yeah. Do you feel that like people have kind of lost the will to cook though? Like I just see these days everyone is like buying ready-made meals and everyone's so busy, so they don't actually make the time to cook, and they're kind of losing that, this like one thing that's built in us as humans, to actually do. And it seems like it just seems like people, it's like seen as a mission to cook, and it's kind of sad, don't you think?
Well, it's a push for convenience, and I think you see that really often in, think about the number one protein snack besides a shake, which, you could argue is a post-workout thing or whatever, but it's protein bars, right? And they're crazy popular, going mainstream, far beyond like just a niche bodybuilding thing and into, everybody has a protein bar every now and then, they get it. And then no one really feels the need to make them anymore, besides people like us that kind of understand the difference between them. But I do agree that you lose a bit by relying exclusively on, unwrap, eat. Like, yeah, that's convenient and awesome and, great. But I think at least every now and then getting the cooking going is also a lot of fun. And it's very, it kind of connects people together more. You know, you can cook with your partner and cook with your kids and learn about ingredients. So even if you do choose a convenient ready-made option, you understand the things that go in there a bit more, and you kind of feel more of a, you know, a connection with the different things you're putting in your body.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, I think that's so powerful. Yeah, and I think like you say, it's much more complicated and deeper than just looking at a layer. Like follow that, cut the onion. It's that time with the people. It's the, you know, learning together. And yeah, I think those workshops are really powerful. And I think it's really cool that you still do those, even though, you know, you're really busy. You know, that's quite time intensive, I'd imagine. But, you know, you still make that effort to do that. And I think that's really, really, really awesome. So, you know, yeah.
Yeah, so I was just going to say, like, at those conferences, how do you actually hold those workshops? Because is it the same setup as at Body Power? Because I saw you do one of those talks or demos at the Body Power. How do you then go and do a workshop at those events?
Well, actually, what got me into the idea of doing workshops at events was Body Power, and what I perceive to be a bit of it's not just Body Power, though. I would say a lot of expos and events. What I think is maybe not a failure, but a weakness, which is, you know, I did a few workshops, talks, right? Nutrition talks there. And I've been to a lot of food events, like, you know, where you go and there's stalls and there's celebrity cooks and so on. And you sit down and you see a chef making the food. And, you know, like, yeah, it's cool and all that. But sometimes, you can't eat what they make because of health and safety reasons. So you sit there salivating for like a duration of time, and then you leave. And it's kind of like you want to eat it. Like, there's an element, it's almost like watching a video in that, you know, it's cooler because the person's actually there making this stuff. But without getting your hands dirty and doing and tasting, I feel like you're missing such a big element of it. And especially when it comes to new things like protein bars or pancakes or things that maybe are unusual to some people. You know, when you see it being done, sure, but then you don't taste it and you don't see what the difference is. So I think part of what made it so cool was what made the idea happen was that, you know, I was doing those talks, people were coming, they were really busy, they were giving really good review, but I felt like you're not going to get it until you do it. So when's the first time we did a work? It was actually SFN, the one I'm doing next month, 2 years ago, where we rolled out actual workshops. So we have, you know, we sell the ticket usually either comes like I think even the BBC and the SFN. So people buy it as an add-on, the workshop, and it's really cheap. It's, you know, under £10 or usually 7 to 10 pounds extra on their ticket. And they come in and we have everything laid out. And it's kind of like the workshop you came to, but the one in London was full on baking and so on. This is more, you know, raw protein bars and balls and truffles and so on. And then we make protein fluff. So they come in, you know, we talk to them, and then they just get to put on their gloves and play with the food. And we have, you know, giant tubs of nut butters on the table. And, you know, I tell them, guys, we're going to make protein bars using a protein powder or a cooking mix and nut butter and some kind of sweetener, honey, whatever. And they're always like, oh, God, like how much nut butter? And I'm like, as much as you want. And they're like,
as much as possible.
Like, you like peanut butter? Go for it. So, you know, we've had events where people literally put on their glove and reach into the nut butter, grab it, and then put it in their bowl. And it's that, you know, that playing with food thing that I think people just kind of, their eyes go nuts and they're like, I'm doing this, you know.
It's okay.
Yeah, so, and then they walk out for the workshops with, you know, the SFN last year, we had people walk out with grocery store bags full of protein bars and balls. So it's really cool. You learn, you play, you kind of experience, and then you eat for days. Super cool.
So, and just taking it back, like, you know, obviously your life revolves around food, and food is as we were mentioning, like quite an integral part of a family. You've got an interesting background, like you grew up with parents from different, you know, backgrounds, and obviously with different backgrounds comes different food. So I would imagine, did you have like, an interesting childhood in terms of your food. Like, did you eat, I think, is it your dad's Greek and your mum's from Mexico? Is that right?
Yeah.
And so did they influence you in that way? Or how did that progression happen?
Well, they'd always been really, really into food, like in cooking and making, both Greece and Mexico have very rich food traditions, and the food has just been a very, very big part of our lives. Just, we go on holiday and we just eat, and, we sit down and we eat, and we always just, everything revolves around food, that kind of thing. And but my dad's always been into nutrition in the gym. Like, I think he was into bodybuilding when he was younger. So we always, alongside our traditional meals, we always have protein powders, and the kind of big tubs around the house. And he would make puddings with it and, stuff like that. So there was that, passion for food, but also, interest in nutrition and protein and things like that growing up.
And
so take it. Sorry.
No, yeah. So I was just going to find out, like, what sort of protein powders did they have back then in the day?
Yeah.
Do you know?
Oh, yeah. I remember. Well, when I was in high school and university, he used to have the EAS.
Ah, yeah.
Oh, yeah.
EAS, yeah, old school. And he used to buy these. Not just the tubs were, I think, Optimum Nutrition, but there was these EAS pouches of different flavors. So there was a vanilla chocolate and a strawberry, and he used to just open them up, putting them in a bowl, turn it into a pudding. And I started doing that too, and I was doing an internship at the time, and I remember taking those for lunch, and everybody there was like, what's that? And I used to think it was delicious, just like mix it in with my milk or whatever, and be like, So yeah, that's kind of what started it all, I think. And a lack of never compromising for food. I think when you come from a really foodie background, you start putting emotion into food a lot more. So when you eat something nasty, you kind of get angry a bit. So it's that kind of passion for food, but and an expectation for it to be really satisfying. And when it's not, it's like,
the hell, yeah.
Yeah, and cool. So yeah, you obviously grew up in like quite a few different countries as well. And like, what made you decide to move to Scotland from growing up in it was like Chile, Mexico, Chicago, and then all of a sudden you decide to come and study in Scotland?
I did high school in Chicago.
Yeah.
And I wanted to go to university somewhere in English. And I was looking at universities in the US and here in the UK. And one of the ones that I really liked was St. Andrews up in Scotland. And I applied. Their degree, I studied psychology, seemed really, really cool. And Prince William was there, so I thought, got to do it. No, I'm kidding. I actually met people that chose to go there because he was there. Which is really,
was he actually there when you were there?
Yeah, he was a year older. So you'd meet people that were like, oh, there he is.
Whoa, there he is.
It's a bit weird. But yeah, it just looked like a really good program in a really cool small town. I always liked, I'm not very good with directions or, the idea of being in a small town that I could walk around in and kind of get to know and a little bubble. Then people always call it a bubble. So anyway, I chose to go there.
Nice.
That's
and
cool.
And what was was that the social linguistics?
No, it was flat out psychology, and
right.
It was very kind of neuropsychology heavy. So the science, the brain, and kind of neuroscience stuff as opposed to therapy,
Right.
Kind
of. When you studied the socio-linguistics, that's really, really interesting thing. Like I don't know if I've met anyone that studied that before. And tell me what sort of interested you in getting into that?
Well, when I was doing my dissertation for psychology, so you do your 4 years and then you have a big project. So I chose to do it in social psychology, and my focus was understanding. It was kind of a selfish project in that it was very introspective. So I wanted to understand how people like me that had grown up in a lot of different cultures, identified themselves in terms of culture and identity and nationality and so on. And so I interviewed, dozens of people to talk to them about their experiences. Like, what's home, like what culture are you? Where do you feel like you belong? And, all these things that most people go around the world, you watch sports and you're like, that's my team, But what happens when you don't have a home, or you speak all these different languages, but maybe you have an accent in every single one of them, and everybody thinks that, you're foreign, but you're never from somewhere. Those kind of questions is what my research was looking at. So at the end of that, I wanted to look into that further, which is where I got into sociolinguistics, which is the study of language and how it affects behavior. And I was looking at issues to do with cultural representations of migrants and how they are perceived as other in different scenarios. And it was with a focus on U.S. and Mexico relations. Anyway, I could go but it's kind of totally irrelevant to what I'm doing right now, which is a bit sad. But
I don't know so much, because I think, when you're an entrepreneur, you work for yourself, and one of the things you do as an entrepreneur is you have to be able to communicate what you're actually about and what you do. And I think communication in any way or form, if you can sort of learn something about that and become better at it, you just become better at other things in your life. So I think there probably is some kind of on some level, like it's going to definitely, boost the way you communicate things, and you're aware of the way you're communicating things to different people. And I think that probably is quite a big skill to have.
And I also think that, while totally irrelevant, I was going down the route of academia, hardcore, like master's, PhD, everything was kind of, and then I was like, but regardless of that, I do think there's an element of kind of cultural unitas happening between people that cook this way and have a passion for food in this way, and nutrition and fitness that transcends national borders and cultural backgrounds and even genders and kind of experiences, and brings people together. And, we have, to go back to the workshops, we have people that come from all over the world. We've had this one workshop with someone from Singapore, Israel, Gibraltar, the UK, and there was someone Canadian, and then it's, all these people together that sometimes don't speak, well, they all speak English, but in different, second, third language, but they all get it, and I think that's really cool.
So that's their sports team. They all do have a sports team, and it's the protein cooking.
Yeah. Yeah.
And just out of interest, how do you identify yourself? Like, in terms of, I guess, what nationality do you identify most with?
I don't. I mean, when people ask me where I'm from, I just kind of say where my parents hail from and where I grew up. And I mean, I've been living in the UK the longest I've lived anywhere in my entire life. But people, I have an American accent, so whenever I go anywhere, they're like, "How long have you been here?" And I'm like, "Well, 16 years." So, it's one of those, like, I could say here, but I don't think really I'm British in any way. So, yeah, it's a weird question. I mean, when I go to Greece and Mexico, I definitely am perceived as slightly foreign because my accent isn't as regional. It's more kind of. So yeah,
so what you're saying basically is that we're all human and we're all the same.
Yeah, actually, yeah. But not everybody thinks that, which is a bit of a shame. But.
No, that is very, very true. So listen, we've spoken a little bit about your background in the nutrition but I'd love to come back to that. But you're also into, along with the nutrition side of it, the fitness side of it is obviously an integral part. So, like, I'd love to hear more about, pre-baby, post-baby, and, like, was there a difference? And what do you do these days to keep yourself healthy and not just looking good?
Well, I would say that I was into running a lot and weightlifting when I was at university. When I was growing up, I hated exercise. I almost failed every single gym class I took in school. And I was just one of those people that were not into exercise at all. But then I hit university and I feel like I needed a hobby. so I started going to the gym, and then talking to my dad more, and then it was kind of like, oh my God, this is really cool. You can feel your progress. You know, you go to the gym one day and you can't lift this weight, and then you go, 2 weeks later, and you're like, my body can do this, and it's that sense of constant achievement. I suppose with running you can get further and so on, but I feel like it's really kind of
tangible.
Yes, tangible with weightlifting. So I like doing that a lot. And then that's throughout university. Then I got more and more into the kind of weightlifting element of it. And I guess it was less common than it is now to see women on the weight floor. There was a lot more kind of, you'd see kind of some women look in and then kind of like walk away. And a lot of PTs would, I constantly used to hear this when they used to give the tours to the different gyms, and they'd introducing a woman to the gym their first time, and then they'd skip the weight floor, or they just point at it and say, that's where the guys are, or like that's, you might not want to know this. And so there used to be a lot more division between women doing cardio, men doing weightlifting, and every, maybe one or two women kind of in there. And whereas now it's great. You see a lot more. I mean, obviously it depends where you are, but now you see women lifting weight, which is, I think, awesome,
I used to see so many people at the gym, like going and then some guy would go and help a girl at the gym, and his form was terrible, but then he'd help a girl who didn't really need help, and then and she'd be like, I don't need your help, and nowadays it's probably the direct opposite.
Yeah. No, I think yeah.
Yeah, one thing I also like, I there's two questions here. So do you find that girls are still intimidated to go into a weight section? Because, like, let's be honest, guys are actually a little bit creepy and quite sleazy when it comes to, they pretty much like, they just, a girl comes in and they check her up and down, and who knows what they're thinking. But that is like quite unsettling and uncomfortable for girls. So I think for them, that's why a lot of them still don't go into the weight section. And then the second part, the second part is about girls thinking that they are going to get like really muscly from hitting weights, but ultimately, they're kind of missing a key element, and that's like a lot of testosterone, which is a big factor in growing muscle. So, what's your advice to girls when it comes to those two things?
Well, I think one of the things that you mentioned, so the first one about women being kind of checked out and in a weird environment, I think oftentimes that's what they think, and that's what a lot of people think. But when it comes to it, no one really cares. Like, at the end of the day, like, wherever you are at the gym, people are looking at themselves in the mirror, or they might be cringing at someone doing something in terrible form. But in reality, they're not, I don't think, unless you go to like a sleaze kind of environment or sometimes I suppose if there's like packs of like kind of sleazy guys together, they might engage in that kind of like, check her out, kind of like a cheesy thing. But I think in most cases, there's the need to drill into women in particular that no one cares. Like, no one cares, that no one's looking at you. I mean, unless they're going in like semi-nude, like no one really like,
yeah,
you do your thing, put on your music and ignore whatever, And I think there's a lot happening that's making women more able to walk in, which is there's more women there, so that they feel less alone in there. And two, there's more education happening and more understanding that, and a lot of, I think, influencers and celebrities and so on that are pushing this idea that if you want to look good, like, you should lift some type of weights. And I mean, I suppose that's a bit not really. I mean, it's happening more and more that they set the example that they say, I've been to the gym, I've done this, and they kind of have heavy lifting routines or not. But does that? I think things are changing.
Yeah, that's
and
good.
Education is a big part of it.
And I totally agree with that. Yeah.
Yeah, and what about?
I think people are egocentric. Sorry.
And what about like the muscle part of it? Girls worried about putting on too much muscle by hitting weights.
Well, I think again, the education is making it clearer that that's not really possible. And the people that women look up to that are, personal trainers or they exercise a lot, they're like, okay, that person's not massive. Like, what, that doesn't make sense. I mean, there's a lot of myth that still needs to be dispelled, especially in, health and women's magazines and traditional mainstream publications that are like, advocating just eating salad and detoxing and doing cardio as long as humanly possible. I think that that's still there for sure, but it's less so. It depends on where you are. In the US, I think it's far more advanced than it is here in the UK, where you do see more of that dieting mentality and cardio and make yourself small and shrink as opposed to, lift and feel the power in your body and be strong. And that's awesome.
Yeah, there's a big difference between like increasing your health span and just trying to look amazing. I think there's a massive difference, and slowly but surely people are like talking more about that, which is really good. So yeah. we were discussing like changes in trends with in the gym and that kind of thing, as Gareth was saying, and yourself, Anna. But I would imagine that there's been a lot of, you've been in the game now of protein for some time and nutrition's notoriously like a crazy, everyone's got their opinion about something, so it's quite an opinionated field to be in. So I was wondering what sort of changes have you noticed specifically with what you do over the time that you've been doing it? Have opinions changed a lot? And yeah, maybe you could just discuss a little bit more what sort of trends you've noticed over the last 4 or 5 years that you've been doing this.
So absolutely. When I was at university, St. Andrews, small town, again, there was one health food shop that had protein powder. And I used to go there and buy my protein regularly. And there was an old lady behind the counter. And I used to buy these tubs with oiled men on the cover, on the label, right? And the first time she was like, "Oh, is this for your boyfriend?" And I'm like, no, it's for me, And she'd kind of be like, "Oh God," that mentality of this small girl's gonna turn into this big man. She wants that, but and she was like, "Oh, it's like 20 pounds or whatever." So I'd be like, okay. Then I'd be back again. Same oil tub. She's like, "Oh, like, are you sure?" And I used to walk around with these giant tubs of oiled men. And I think that has changed dramatically. Like nowadays, protein has gone away from a bodybuilding thing where you see words like mass written all over it. And there's this conception of protein equals mass. So if you want to be big, you got to have protein powder. So it's gone far away from there. I mean, there's still niche proteins that do that. But I think that there's a huge understanding amongst the general population of the need to have protein in everybody's diets and the convenience of protein powder. The notion that it's not a chemical, artificial, thing. Like my grandmother at the beginning used to think that protein powder were steroids, like that notion of artificial, like non-food has gone a huge way since, 2000, early 2000, even, post 2013. I think you see more and more brands of protein powder that are coming out highlighting natural, highlighting convenience, highlighting clean, or the fact that it's food, And so I think that, when it comes to marketing, there's a lot more women that are buying these products. There's a lot bigger range of users. So it's beyond just mass building, heavy men, bodybuilding-esque protein powder consumers, and more towards, moms, dads, grandparents. Like there's, a more of an understanding that this isn't just so I can get huge. This is food. So, yeah.
And so I take it. Sorry.
No, go on.
No, so I just wanted to say, so like that's really from a nutritional standpoint, with yourself, and I think that's totally true with ladies. What about kids and protein? Like, number one and number two, are all proteins made equal? Could you maybe just discuss a little bit between like meat? Because I mean, a lot of people think about, maybe I'm adding a third question here, but let's start with kids. Like, how do you introduce like good proteins with kids?
Well, one of the things that is important, I think, is to highlight And I still do it. I used to do it a lot more than now, but I still do it when talking to people. And, you know, you kind of dispel the idea of this isn't going to make you huge. This is a food item. It's a convenient way to eat protein. So when we go back and think about baby formula, you know, something nutritious that a lot of babies end up needing, you know, no one questions the validity or the naturalness of whey protein being in there. It's in many ways what you find in a tub is just ultra filtered and made, you know, more digestible by babies and so on. But it's the same nutrition dense ingredient. And I think that, you know, it's found in a lot of foods that we regularly consume, from breads to chocolates to milk, flavored milks. And, you know, all the it's not a weird thing made out of, you know, in a lab that it's just like muscle building. So, you know, highlighting that is important, and that it's throughout, you know, our food chain, regularly understood as a nutritious and convenient food source. So I guess that, and when it comes to kids and protein powder, I don't think, you know, when you think about protein powder consumption, it's usually something that I consider to be a nutritious and healthy alternative to meat products and so on, and in a way for adults to get the kind of protein they need. I don't think kids have as high needs of protein when it comes to gram per body weight that they need to turn to protein powders to expand their consumption. I mean, unless they want to make some protein pancakes with whey, which is totally fine, but through, you know, the regular consumption of, you know, if they eat chicken, even vegetables and bean sources, etc., I think they fulfill their requirements. Depends on the person, but if they're lactose intolerant, they can't eat eggs and things like that, I think something like pea protein could come in really handy. And you can make cookies and pancakes, and you can make even burgers and things like that. So does that answer the question?
Yeah, totally. Yeah. Thanks so much.
And sorry, and there's so much sort of to understand about like actual protein powders, and if we can just like talk a bit more about, say, how they are like manufactured. Just my understanding is that how it all came about is that this was there was a waste product from the pasteurization and milk process, and then I think off the back of that actually it was from cheese. I think like the whey is like a waste product of cheese that farmers, I think in New Zealand, this is where it all started. They were like, we never, ever use this stuff because it's actually rubbish and no good to anybody, not even to like our animals for feed. And then someone with a commercial mindset was like, oh no, well actually there's something in here that we can extract, and now we can actually use it. So, I mean, does it actually have the right amount of like nutritional content in it? Is it still actually good nutrition if you're using whey? And has the process changed much over the years since it was first sort of like found out?
So, I mean, people have been using whey protein in particular for, I think, millennia. You can find it in some ancient writings or references to whey. But whey in particular is a medicinal kind of curative ingredient, or rather a drink that used to be given to certain people that, you know, the nutritional value of it, I think, has been recognized for a while, but it was never completely mainstream until I think the 80s, when Optimum Nutrition in many ways kind of became the number one brand that stuck protein powder in a tub, and, you know, they began the whole muscle building thing. And it was, you know, whey. And the manufacturing of it is come from cheese. So it's a byproduct of the cheese creation. So it comes up like in a liquid form, and then they separate it and they spray dry it in these giant kind of tube things, and it comes out like snow. And then they separate it into casein and whey, and then different types of whey and milk proteins and so on. But it's been, when it comes to protein powders, you know, even today, a lot of people see protein powder and they assume whey protein powder. But since then, there's been a lot more different kinds of proteins that have come into the market. And one of the beauties of it that to me I think is really, really cool and important and worth highlighting is the fact that from a sustainability point of view, from a exclusive meat consumption angle, protein powders can provide so much alternatives to our issues with water and livestock and so on, because you're using a byproduct of something else. Think, for example, hemp protein powder. It used to be that in the manufacture of hemp oil, which is really nutritious and yummy and so on, they used to end up with a ton of hemp protein powder that they used to give to pigs, right? Because it's high in omega-369s, it's high in fiber, lots of protein, and, you know, give it to the pigs, make them big, let's eat the pigs, right? But then at some point, someone realized that this protein is actually really good for people too, and we're already creating it as a byproduct. We can actually start selling it to people as a, you know, beneficial thing. And so you bring something that wasn't in the chain of food into humans. You know, pigs have other stuff they can eat. They eat everything. So, you know, we can take the food from the pigs. So, you know, you bring it into people as a way to, from my point of view, not just supplement with protein, but substitute other sources of protein with a byproduct like hemp. And that's my number one kind of issue with paleo diets, is that all great, you know, fine and dandy, whatever, you can continue. It's very kind of mythical and so on and romanticized, but whatever else, the major issue for me is the sustainability angle. We cannot like all afford to be eating grass-fed cattle. You know, the world would go kaput, you know, in terms of its resources. So when you bring in protein powders, you're utilizing something that wouldn't otherwise be part of your diet, and thus not eating something else. So that's a really cool thing that makes me, and has always made me, more prone to using protein powder, not just as a supplement, but as a substitute for other protein-based ingredients.
That's really interesting.
And do you use like protein powder after you train? Do you like have it in a shake, or do you predominantly use it in your cooking?
I think what created ProteinPow is a recipe-based website, and the motto of the old book, which was, you know, think outside the shake, is that, to me, you know, I used to have shakes when my dad was, you know, way back in the day. Sometimes he'd have a shake and I'd be like, oh, but I'd always loved eating, you know, like sitting down with a spoon or a fork and, you know, digging into what I'm eating. So that's what made me kind of use protein powders in food, and to make cookies and brownies and waffles and things like that, as opposed to just, you know, you kind of throw it in, you shake it, and then it's done. You just consume like 300, 400 calories, and you could spread them out, you know, and sit down and have something more satisfying. So that makes me kind of cook with it more. So I literally never have shakes, and I have pancakes, waffles, and things like that throughout the day, really.
A little bit of texture goes a long way.
Yeah, exactly. And volume, you know, like protein fluff. Like, it's the same thing as a protein shake, but when you have it fluffed up, it's like a giant bowl. And you can
that's so cool.
Yeah, I remember learning about fluff at your workshop, and I'd never ever had it before. And I mean, it's like one of the easiest things to make and the most tasty things ever. And it's that texture that really adds to the taste, that's for sure. Yeah,
it's that airy kind of, like, you feel like you're eating whipped cream with like a fruit flavor, and it's like, love it.
Yeah, it's like I'm eating this thing that, like, it feels like I'm cheating, but it's actually quite good for me.
And it's really like low calorie, high protein, and packed full of vitamins, and, you know, it's a yummy kind of thing. So if I could choose between a giant bowl of protein fluff and a protein shake, I'd go for the fluff.
Totally, yeah. And so you must have tried millions of different brands and types of protein. I know I've also, over the years, I reckon, tried every single one in the world. And I just out of interest, which was your favorite?
What was my favorite? I mean, I guess the more time went on, so, you know, the more protein powders I used, the more I became more of a purist about it, if that makes sense. So, you know, that's why last year we released our own one ingredient stuff, because I realized that there's more you can do by flavoring something plain and however you want than by buying something that's pre-flavored. So I was having so many issues over the years with a really nice chocolate. It was a chocolate whey protein at the time. You go from brand to brand, and suddenly you go from something that tastes all right to foot. Like literally foot. It's just like, I don't know why it is. I think people flavoring chocolate protein powders sometimes maybe don't have a palate. I mean, I don't know, but there's some stuff out there that is just, ooh. And, same with some vanillas and strawberries. And I was thinking, I found myself just always, I love cocoa, chocolate. Just buying either vanilla or plain and adding cocoa and my own sweeteners and kind of making something that actually satisfied my taste buds. So, over time, I've gone more and more away from pre-bought, pre-flavored things into, what I want. And another thing that has happened, I think, over time and through trying all these proteins and cooking with them is that most protein powders are created for shakes, right? So they have gums to make them kind of, you add water. They have lecithins so that you add water and they distribute well. But when it comes to cooking, you don't need gums. And sometimes when you have a protein powder with extra gums, you can end up with something really gummy. And I think everybody that's ever cooked with protein powder has ended up with a stack of pancakes that are like a shoe sole. Like a rubberized thing that's more like a weapon than like an actual food item. And, over time, I just kind of started deconstructing the added ingredients that are added to commercial protein powders besides the protein, understanding more about the sweeteners, about the gums, about all the things that are added extra that you'll never find on the main label. They're kind of like a by the way. So, for the few years now, I always try to instill people the need to always, always, always read labels. And not just be swayed by, fancy marketing or especially, women products. I'm like, ignore the word diet and kind of whatever words are used for marketing. Just don't let that speak to you. Just turn whatever tub you're considering over, look at what it has and think, is that what I want and what I need? And then, so I think that learning experience has happened over time. And it's one that I always try to kind of, get across more because I think a lot of people miss it because of really kind of shiny marketing and so on.
And you've carry on.
No, sorry. Is there like any products in particular you tell people to try avoid?
I try
ingredients.
to avoid. I try to avoid protein powders with Ace K because I don't think that's a great sweetener source. I think there's better sweeteners. And, aspartame, I think there's better options. And it's more of a freedom. I think people should have or can have the information they need to make informed decisions, right? So I'm not overly prescriptive in telling people, this will kill you, this is toxic, because it's all about the dosage. At the end of the day, drink too much water, you could die. It's not, a lot of people, companies, and resources out there demonize and vilify particular ingredients is, telling people that if you eat sucralose, you're going to have disease, or if you do this, that. And I think it's all about dosage and understanding and not being swayed by really sensationalist, articles and, kind of consider the source. But, that being said, there's some ingredients that I just think are better than others. And the most important thing I think people should and can do is just know about them and make informed decisions as opposed to not know what they're buying and then kind of just buying it because they're told to buy it or because, they don't know anything about it. And same with gums. I don't have an issue with gums like xanthan gum, guar gum, and so on. Like, they're gums. They make things, airy and kind of milkshakey. But if you're cooking with it, you might not want it, So it's just about an educational thing. And things like, I always tell people to avoid diet products and female products. And I just think buying them kind of normalizes a discourse that tells women that they're different. And that's one of the things that makes me burn with anger the most because we're not. And the notion that women need special treatment, that women need special kinds of training or special kinds of diet I mean, we need less food because, you know, we kind of metabolize things differently and we're smaller people with smaller muscle mass, but we don't need, you know, all these special products, let alone diet. I mean, this is something that just, I remember going to an expo last year and there was a protein powder stand and it was strength on one side, men's protein, and diet and weight loss, and that was a women's protein. And this notion that men should train for strength and women should always want to be less and shrink and just become smaller, that really pisses me off, because I think that is really disempowering and inaccurate and really kind of fomenting very negative relationships of women with food and with their own bodies that really should be kind of, you know, that's my axe taken down.
Now, you've got some really, really good points there. And like, do you generally, in your books, for the people that haven't read them, you know, you've got a lot of interesting knowledge and a lot of, you know, you've done a lot of the research. You've put the hard yards in to try and understand these things. I'd love to just hear more about, like, you know, what your upcoming, have you got any upcoming books that you're interested in? And also a little bit more about BabyPow, because it's all about, you know, some evidence-based resources for people. So your books and the BabyPow. So maybe you could just have a chat about those things a little bit.
Yeah, so I actually have the props here. So this is the first book. Came out in 2013. That's me with a fierce farmer's tan.
Can you see it? I've got it too.
Tan. So that was, you know, self-published. I designed, wrote, edited, ate the whole thing. And then off of that, I got a book deal from a major publishing house in the U.S. with offices worldwide. And then this is when this baby came out, which is like more, you know, a giant kind of
Glossy.
So we're actually releasing a second edition of that later book next year, which is exciting because it's been selling like crazy all over the world. And I think it's because this, you know, understanding that's going on, this educational thing that protein can be a mainstream fun cooking ingredient as opposed to a niche supplement. But then above that, there's a new book coming out in December of this year. And it talks about issues of, you know, the sustainability angle, protein powder, and it's very kind of, well, it's more all natural in that it doesn't use any flavorings, or it uses more things like dates and honey and, you know, kind of, you know, less complicated things, because the last book is huge, like it's so many different kinds, but it uses also vanilla protein and chocolate protein and different kinds of protein. So people were commenting sometimes like, do I have to go out and buy all these ingredients? So the new book is more, you know, less ingredients per recipe and more like bare bone kind of snack making things. So that's coming out in December 5th. It's already on pre-order in most major bookstores worldwide, which is, it's cool. And so that's so BabyPow.
Yeah.
Sorry to interrupt you. I was just wondering if, like, before we move on to BabyPow, because I think BabyPow is like an amazing thing that we can spend some time on too. Just talking a bit about the books. Like, I mean, I've listened to lots of people that have written books, and just about the whole process of going about it. It seems like it's a massive undertaking, I guess, just in terms of your time, the research, and then the promoting of the book. Can you just, you know, talk more about that, because it's, you know, it's very interesting to understand the sort of stress it might even put you under.
So there's a different process, I think, between when you self-publish a book and when you work with a publisher. In that, when you self-publish the book, so the one you have behind your head, I noticed, the Farmer's Tan book. When you do that, there's so much more work and strain. I mean, you know, because you have to edit everything. You have to lay down the photos. You have to, you know, I drawing all over it, and you have to do, you know, from A to B, Z, do the entire thing and make sure that it's perfect. You cannot get away with any typos. You cannot get away with, you know, it's a rare. Whereas when you work with a publisher, you have copy editors and you have an editor and you have a whole team of staff that can make the process when it comes to the actual editing and layout easier, because they're, you know, they have a team of designers, they have a team of, you know, it's a less of an undertaking. Albeit also a bigger one in the sense that both the last book and the next one are a lot bigger, just in terms of recipe. So you have to make the recipe, you have to test it, test it again, consider tweaking and make sure there's no errors at all in it. And then they take care of the sales and distribution, which I think is, one of the biggest things that, when I was doing my self-published book, I was dealing with booksellers like all the time, and with book printing, because the book was printed in Italy, then it was shipped to the UK, and then from the UK I had to ship it to the US and all over the world. It was just like, wow, it's a much bigger job than having sales teams all over the world selling it into everywhere. And what made me also move from a self-published book to accepting book deals and working with a publisher is the fact that they can get them to places I couldn't, through the fact that they have sales teams. So, for example, the book, the last one is in Walmart, is in every bookstore, all over the world. It's been translated to Finnish. Like, I couldn't do this and still be a human person. Like I'd have to clone and do crazy things. And I don't think even that, get it into giant big box stores and print, hundreds of thousands and just be like, yeah. So
I think a big lesson there for people is that, like, get started, and, you can't just suddenly become necessarily become that big books, multiple $1 million book salesperson. You put the hard work in initially, you made it happen. You didn't just expect it to happen for you. And I think that's really cool. Like, you actually just went ahead and did it, whereas so many people are nervous and, they don't have that trust in themselves that they can do it. So they don't never start. And you obviously had to start somewhere and just get on with it and do it, which is such a cool story.
Yeah, and I think going through the process of writing your own book, even if it's, like mine, it's a much smaller book, and it's, it's rougher around the edges, it's very goofy. But the fact that you kind of get it out there, you understand the process, and you kind of give, if you wanted to work with a publisher, which not everybody does, you have an example of your work out there. It's, kind of like being a photographer, you have a portfolio, or, you have a proof of concept. Even if your book is niche, that there's an audience, and, you've done it. You've, kind of reaped that ground somehow. So,
yeah.
And like something I like for me is just, I just associate it with you so much, and I really love it, is the little drawings. Right. So where did the drawings start? Have you always been into them? And like, how do you do them? Because they're everywhere. They're on your posts on like Instagram and Facebook and in your books. And I mean, they're amazing. Not just, so first of all, you have to spend days making the recipes and tweaking them and making them perfect. But then also you do the drawing too. So, where did that all start?
So, well, growing up, I always wanted to go to art school, but my parents, I think, were like, "Why don't you study something, before, like, have a backup plan." So I continued to doodle. Not that the doodles that I make in the cartoons are what I wanted to study in art school, because I think you go more to graphic design for that. But anyway, I was always into cartoons and funny things like that, like sketching and drawing. And I was before ProteinPow was born, I was at a meeting, and I was taking notes, and throughout university, and all my notes are in cartoons, right? Like, I would study like about history or whatever, and instead of taking notes about the events, I draw, the actual things happening, and it always helped me kind of visualize things better. So all my university and everything, all my notebooks are packed full of drawings and, things related to what I was learning at the time. So I was at this business meeting and I was taking notes, and all my notes were cartoons. And this person was like, no, actually ProteinPow was born. And this person was like, why don't you actually include that into what you're doing? Because clearly, like, and that's cool to see. So I started sketching on the website and, uploading my sketches that were already existing in notebooks and stuff. And then I realized it just made it more fun. And what made ProteinPow different, as opposed to being just here's a recipe, here's a photo food, here's a recipe, was the stories behind the food. So I thought, what better to bring these stories to life than by, bringing in an illustrated element that actually already exists with them. So yeah, I sketch on paper usually, and then I update it. I upload it onto my computer, in black and white, and then you color it, and then you create like a big render image, and then you stick it on everywhere.
And what is there any like specific program you use for it when you
Photoshop.
Photoshop
and Illustrator? Yeah.
And some of them are now animated. Hey, I think I've seen like a few little animations on your Insta. It's like really awesome.
That's very rudimentary. Like going back probably like pre-Flintstones era, like, you know, kind of images together. Like I downloaded this app actually. I don't remember what it's called, but it's an animated app. It's really cool, where it gives you like multiple blank pages, like in a row, like a carousel.
Yeah.
And then you draw one, and then you can animate the other on the back of that one. So it's literally like those books you see that you kind of go like, yeah. So it's literally like that. So yeah, sadly, I cannot claim to have, you know, crazy animating software. But hopefully at some point I will, because I love that part of it, of bringing, you know, making them come to life.
Yeah, that's awesome. And yeah, so just one last thing, and yeah, before we go on to ProteinPow. So you've obviously also got your own supplement range now, but it's more like a cooking supplement than like one you actually take after training. Can you just tell me like what's the difference between the two?
Well, I think the difference is that it's more of an ingredient than it is a supplement. So, you know, when I started the website and promoting and cooking with these ingredients, I used to Google like protein cookie or protein brownie and the recipes used to appear in bodybuilding forums, right? And you'd have mug cakes that were like a plastic looking thing, like emerging out of a mug, right? And there wasn't a lot of understanding about how to cook with protein, because a lot of people were perceiving protein powders as something you could sub for flour in a recipe. And when you approach it like that, that is a disaster. I mean, that's like the worst thing you can do, because you're going to end up with like hard rubbery thing. Protein powder is not flour. So it has to be understood as its own thing, you know, and you kind of build a recipe around it. So for like our protein powders, the whole notion of it is to make it into an ingredient that people can use in food, as opposed to treat it like either a flour substitute or a protein powder. So there's recipes on the back of it. There's a recipe booklet on top, and then they all tie especially to the new book. They're kind of one ingredient staples. Like take, for example, I make like a healthy lasagna. And so I don't eat gluten. And one of the things that is always a bit complicated is making bechamel sauce, which is flour and cheese, right? So the best bechamel sauce, I think, is you get the milk, and I use almond milk. You put the cheese in there, like sharp cheddar, and then pea protein. And pea protein thickens the thing like beautifully. And there's so many things that you can do with it for food, that you're not enriching something with protein, but you're using it as you would other proteins, like vegetarian burgers. You put the protein powder with vegetables in there. You mush it up to create a patty. You fry it up, and it actually behaves like a burger. You know, I think that's cool. So that's what the powders try to do, is take powder away from protein shake supplement and into cupboard ingredient that you can all make really cool things with.
Yeah, that's really cool.
Without making a weapon.
Yeah, without making a weapon.
And the research that goes into sort of creating your own food supplements, can you just talk a bit about that? It seems like, I mean, a minefield. Where do you even start?
Well, I mean, it was actually, at least for like our powders now, it's simple. You get the purest, most basic protein, and then we don't like need to add a ton of stuff to it. It's like the core of a really good protein powder. You just take away all the like flavorings and artificial sweeteners and gums and all this stuff, and you get your kind of raw ingredient, and that's kind of what it is. So we haven't tried to make something like ultra crazy or difficult or different in the sense of it being, you know, a foreign concept. This is like the core kind of the food. Like the pea protein powder that we have is literally golden pea protein powder, and that's it. There's no need to add more stuff to it. Like a lot of protein powder companies, you see a lot of what do they call, when it's a protected recipes and they don't tell you exactly what's in there. Yeah, but it's what's the word? You see it on the labels.
Trademark?
No, it's like anyway, it's like a weird formula that they've created, and they don't explicitly say what percentages are in there because they want to keep it. Anyway, I don't think there's a need that. Yes, there you go. The proprietary blends. I think that if we want to kind of make things simple and understand and push the idea of these things being natural ingredients that everybody knows and understands, plain is best, and kind of all natural, plain, nothing added. Here's the raw thing. Have fun.
Cool stuff. And so like I guess like Craig was leading onto it just now. 2014 was like a really cool year for you. I mean, every year has been like a massive year for you, just looking at your timeline and storyboard. But 2014, you had your baby girl, and as part of that process, I was listening to a podcast you did with Ben Kuma, and you're talking about you're doing quite a lot of research around training and nutrition as part of being pregnant. And off the back of that, you've developed your own website now, which is very, very informative, called ProteinPow. So do you just want to talk about, like, I guess the whole process, like researching how you met Jessie and then coming up with ProteinPow?
When I got pregnant, prior to that, I was really into very kind of heavy lifting, and I was, a bit like, oh God, what do I, like, how should I train now? Like, should I continue training as heavy? Like, what's the science? Like, what's going on with my body? And I wanted to know, kind of what to do, because you have traditional kind of older people, especially, saying, oh, rest, my dear, kind of like put your feet up and eat all the ice cream. And then, you have other people like PT saying like, oh, go nuts, like it doesn't matter. So I was kind of like, how should I train differently? Because, as a woman, your body's going through an insane transformation. I mean, towards the end, your organs are all pushed up, like, the baby's like taking over. Your stomach is like this size and it's all the way up there. And it's like, your whole balance is off because you're like heavy in front, and in the back, you're like, my back. Anyway, so I was, kind of trying to understand a bit more about how to train and what to do. So I met Jessie online through a friend, because she's in Canada. And I started talking to her. I mean, she is, I think, the number one most amazing personal trainer when it comes to pre and postnatal fitness. And she's always been a really big advocate of, kind of training for birth as you do a marathon, in the sense of preparing your body and being strong throughout it and feeling empowered and, not limited in any way. So, yeah, I connected with her, started working with her. I was going to the gym until like 2 weeks before the baby was born, lifting heavy. All the old people at the gym were like, oh God, like, don't do it. Like, you have to take certain precautions, and there's things you can't do. Like, you can't do like heavy squats, and, there's things you need to adapt based on where you are and where your particular body is doing at the time. But yeah, I mean, so I found that really empowering and amazing. And Jessie has since gone on to work with Girls Gone Strong, which is a movement worldwide. And they launched a book recently called Moms Go Strong.
Cool.
Moms Go Strong, which is, it's amazing. And I mean, it's resources for other personal trainers, again, that train with women, because there's huge misconceptions amongst the personal training community about how to work with pregnant women. And, oftentimes there might be complete ignorance, and it's ignored ignorance in the sense that they don't know what they don't know. So they end up doing harm to the women, or maybe not harm, but no good, not training them in the way they should be trained to make their, postnatal recovery more likely and pleasant. So, it's a realization of how much more education needs to be done. And she and the Girls Gone Strong team have gone ahead and created this amazing compendium of information and knowledge. So that's really cool. And the website, so ProteinPow, I created it in 2014. I haven't really done much with it because I've been just really busy with stuff, but it's out there, with its information and comment. I always intended to do a lot more with it, but then I just got so busy that it took a back step. So it's there, but it's not too active in the sense of there's just not a lot of time to put me or anyone else kind of behind it to grow it further. So, it's one of those.
I just think it's really awesome though. Like, it's all the stuff you're discussing is so important because you're breaking gender stereotypes just by discussing protein, but then also gymming with a little one and not just for big muscles, and so I think it's such a nice combination of things, and I think so many people can learn from the stuff that you discuss on there as well. Like, for instance, some of the pelvic floor stuff, like how many, like most women at some stage, if they have a baby or whatever, will say, oh, we better train the pelvic floor, but how many men ever think that they need to work on their pelvic floor muscles? So I think it's such good, important stuff to discuss as well. Coming from a woman with the protein combination, I think it's really, really awesome. And I think it's teaching a lot of people a lot more to think about things differently, which is super cool.
Yeah, I just think it's also really empowering. I think when you approach your body as an admirable, strengthful kind of house, as opposed to something to be not afraid of, but I'm pleased with and critical of. And you go through so many different stages where your body does so many different things that really kind of tapping into power and strength as your aim, as opposed to kind of aesthetic goals, makes it more a happier journey, I think, in the long run.
Sure.
And another thing that like you're also really interested in is, or it sounds like you started exploring at least, is insect protein. So Craig and I actually last year with another friend of ours, we started exploring that too, because we're like, okay, we're really passionate about trying to save the earth and looking after the environment. And one of the ways is to make a shift towards a different type of protein, i.e. take away a lot of the beef that's grown. And Craig, what was the guy's name you spoke to, like this professor of something?
That's right. Yeah, so I used to live in the Netherlands, and one of the guys there is pretty much at the forefront of like insect as food and that kind of thing research, and his name it's Prof. Arnold van Huis. And he's just a super interesting guy. And we had 1 or 2 Skype calls. It was such an interesting time because we learned so much. Hey, Gareth, like it's just such an interesting field, especially just all of us living in the West. It's just a thing that no one thinks about really. And, and we had this really cool idea. And then, the guys from Exobar and all that, they've done incredibly well. But I still love to hear your thoughts, like Gareth was saying, and it's just an interesting concept and really, I think, really valuable as well.
Yeah, I mean, the whole people have been eating insects for millennia, and in a lot of countries around the world, it's not a weird thing. It's part of life. There's actually a fascinating documentary. I mean, I don't know if you guys are following the podcast with like links, but there's this incredibly awesome documentary about, I think it's a BBC documentary that talks about eating insects, and it goes around to it's Thailand, and it goes to different countries and looks at insects, and the guy there actually eats them, and it's like it's a really cool thing just to see the way in which they're not a gross, icky thing in so many different parts of the world. Yet here, I think that even from a young age, I noticed that, my little girl, there's a lot of books we read about different things. And there's one that's like, this monster eats, nasty things like fingernails and bugs, And I think, I'm sitting here with like I don't know, I have this. So it's bacon and cheese crickets, right? And she saw them and she's like, ooh, and I'm like, I start opening. She's like, no,
don't do it.
She's like, don't do it. So I decided not to, because I don't want to give the example that she can go outside and it's dark, eat the bugs on the floor. But there's this, from a, Lion King, although the Lion King, that scene where the bull picks up like I think it's the bull one, like a bug, and it bites it and it's like crunchy. I personally always thought that looked kind of yummy, but I think most people would be like, ew. But there's a lot of that kind of idea that this is not edible, and it's it's a non-food thing, much like I don't know what else is, like spiders. You don't look at them and you're like, yeah, that with bacon. But yeah, so I heard about chapool in the U.S. first, and I started reading about what those guys are doing. So, they're farming crickets, and they're creating, protein bars with them. And I actually spoke with the guy that started the company called Pat, and, about what they're doing. And I started doing my MBA, and I was doing a project about cricket protein. And I, spoke about that and did a lot of research into cricket protein. And, the more you look at it as a sustainable food source, the more just convinced you are by the idea, because cricket farming is incredibly water and land, and it's a very sustainable and viable food source that when you compare it to poultry or cattle or any other protein that we farm, the effects that has and the negative impacts that has on our environment are huge. And we're getting to the point where we're maxing out the extent of, land and water we have, and, potable water. And, there's a need to look into more sustainable sources of protein. So then you start looking into insects and just how nutritious they are, the amount of protein they have, the amount of other not ingredients, but minerals like zinc and calcium. And you're like, oh my God, this makes sense. It makes sense why so many people in other parts of the world are turning to this. It's, it's affordable, it's convenient. Well, it's cheap, and you don't need a lot of land. I mean, compared to cattle, you need quite a bit of, acres and for them to graze and be there, etc. With crickets, like, you can have a small pen and just grow them, or, not grow them, but literally harvest them from floor to ceiling. Like, the amount of protein you can have per square foot is like a lot more, and they don't require a lot of water or food. So, I mean, in theory, right, it's a fantastic idea. Now, in practice, it's trickier than that to convince people to want to eat them, because of the mental imagery is still there, and it's heavy. And we were at a food show, I think it was last year, and there was a company there selling crickets with flavored crickets, and we went around the expo just walking around sampling them to people. And we sampled them in protein balls. So we used the crickets to make some protein balls. Then we gave them to people and, asked them to eat it. And they were like, there's crickets in there. And, oftentimes people are like, oh, by the way, there's crickets in there. They're like, it's one of those things, like the mental imagery comes in and they're like, not literally. I mean, I think we did it in a more ethical way than that they were visible. So that it wasn't like, here, eat it, haha. By the way, because some people can be allergic, if they're allergic to crustaceans, they can have issues. So we made sure we didn't do that. But there was that element of, when the idea goes in, and then you kind of, it impacts how you perceive the food. And I think that, doing away with that mental image is really, really tricky.
And it's interesting you say that, because like people, they don't mind eating things like prawns, for example, or like crayfish. And I mean, you look at those things and they look just as scary as a lot of the insects that are out there. So it's almost like just a perception of what we've kind of grown up with.
Totally. And I mean, even I think someone brought up the idea that sushi used to be perceived as non-edible, like raw fish, yet nowadays people eat sushi readily. So there's this idea that maybe over time we're going to get closer to the point where it's going to be accepted and recognized as a food source. But right now there's, you know.
And I think that's where people come in and they say, well, let's try and make some kind of a flour or as an additive so that it's more palatable. Because in theory, if it tastes the same, like with that experiment you did, it's the same. Like what if it tastes good, it tastes good. But then suddenly everyone gets the mental shock. So if they can, like you say, if they can make it more palatable in a format, then it'll be easy.
I mean, Chapul in particular are doing that. So they released I think they were the first kind of U.S. protein cricket containing bars, and then Exo came along, and then Chapul started also doing protein powders. So they blend the insect protein with, I think it's pea protein, and they flavor it. So it's this delicious. I've posted a video on Instagram. It just tastes like, you know, protein. It's vanilla. You wouldn't know that it's cricket containing, just to make it more palatable. But the issue is the extent to which people, when they know kind of thing.
Yeah.
And the crickets themselves have like a chickeny kind of smoky flavor. So it's not, I mean, I've had a few cricket bars, I'm not going to name the brand, but that were just so gross because they try to approach cricket like they would any other kind of dairy or I don't know what else, but you can taste this chicken. It's like smoky chicken with chocolate. I don't know. It's so there's some doing it better than others for sure because it is a different flavor, so you can't mask it completely, you know.
Sure.
Yeah, I found when I made it, like I used almost the same amount of same amount of protein as I would like just a normal supplement, and the bar just tasted disgusting. It really was like you wouldn't even give it to like an animal for to eat. And sorry, just the last sort of like one of the last questions before we wrap up, or things that I noticed about the insect side of things is we were also speaking to a company in South Africa who also grow crickets, but they grow it for animal feed. And when we mentioned to them that we wanted to do it, to use it potentially for humans, they were like, no, there's all these rules around it that it's not ready for human consumption. And so there's restrictions on that side of things too. And I almost wonder if it's more commercial than anything. Do you have any thoughts on that?
I think the EU, for example, it's labeled as a novel food source. So there's a lot of loopholes you have to jump through to make it into an accepted and regulated ingredient that a lot of countries are just going over that now. And there's still a lot of gray areas where, it's the labeling of things. And so, I mean, it might have to do with that. It could be with the way in which they're cleaned maybe, or sterilized, or, there's the environments in which they're bred perhaps would need further kind of human food grade facilities. So, I mean, I think there is kind of some element of that potentially involved with it, but it's a very new thing for us, and it depends on, I think a lot of places that sell the cricket protein potentially bring it from places that already grow crickets for so I know Thailand, for example, exports a lot of their insects out because I think partly they have the facilities already doing this, and also because they're ready for that kind of thing.
Yeah.
But do you want me to tell you about my experience eating them?
Yes, please. Go ahead.
So I was in the U.S. this summer, and one of the things I love to do is feeding grasshoppers to chickens, right? So this is at my husband's parents' house. They have a lot of chickens. So right next to them, they have a food garden, vegetable garden. And in that vegetable garden are a ton of crickets, like more crickets that should be there. So I'm doing a favor, I'm culling kind of to make.
Keeping the population in check.
So I spent, exactly. So I spent, hours just in there, like, you run after them, they jump around, and then you catch them, and then then you give them to the chicken. The chickens like flip out. It's like, for them, I think it's like a delicacy. I don't know, but I kind of approach them, they start coming to me. There's like 30 or 40 chickens. They start coming, then I release a grasshopper in there, and they all start going in there. And the one that catches it, like, puts it in its mouth and runs, because all the other ones are going after it. And they try to pick it out of the mouth. Anyway, it's like a big deal. So, I'm doing the environment good. I am feeding the chickens, and I'm giving them huge pleasure that I'm convinced that the eggs like taste a lot better. So that's happening, right? So at some point, I'm like, okay, Anna, you're really pro insect, like what we were talking about just now, like protein, and you're all about sustainability, and you believe in, like the value of insect protein as a food source, and go ahead and eat one, right? So I thought, put your mouth where your words are. So, I kind of went through that moment of,
Go.
I'm going to do this. So I went to WikiHow, right? Well, how do you cook? It's because I wasn't going to just eat one raw. I don't think people that eat them even do that. You got to cook them, right? So I went to WikiHow, found an article, which I will not recommend to people because it didn't end up working out. So anyway, the article said, catch a bunch of them and freeze them, right, to humanely kill them. And I know the people that create these cricket bars and protein powders, they kill them humanely by, lowering the temperature so their heart stops, and it's not like, killing them violently or whatever. So I went ahead and did that. I got a yogurt can with some holes on top. And I went out with, it was 3 of us went out there with this yogurt thing, and we caught the biggest ones we could, and we stuck them in there, and they're jumping around. We put a lot. I actually have footage of this. I was gonna post about it, but since it didn't end up working out, I thought maybe not. It's there. So anyway, so we put a bunch of them in this cricket, ended up become a cricket container, stuck them in the fridge, right? Next step of the article, it said, sit them in the fridge for a couple of hours until they die. And then what you need to do is take the wings and the legs off and the head, right? So this might be a point of your podcast where we tell vegans to cross, kind of, this is it, guys. Thanks a lot. It's been a pleasure.
Thanks for listening.
Yeah.
Now, viewer discretion. Listener. But anyway, goodbye, vegans.
Cheers, guys.
The process, the WikiHow article then said, let them die, take the wings off, take the legs off, and then grab the head and pull the head out, and with the head will come the guts, right? So, and then you fry them with butter. So I'm like, oh, fair enough, right? So we put them in the fridge. We took them out a couple hours later. We shook it, and there was some movement, so we put it back in. So then we let it another 2 hours. We took them out, and then we started doing this thing, right, where the legs and the arms. So first of all, the legs and the arms are like stuck in there, like it's not like the fly that you take a wing off and it's like, no, you got to
yank
right?
the things.
Yeah, and which is kind of, I mean, maybe if I had grown up like, doing like butchering and, when you kind of are involved with the making of chicken and so on, like it wouldn't be that much of a thing. But I've never done that, right? So I'm like, oh God, Then you kind of pull the head out with the guts, and then you end up with like a shell. Like, in retrospect, the reason I wouldn't recommend this article is because look at how crickets are sold, for eating. Like they have all the parts in there.
Yeah.
Now, if you take all those parts out, granted, these were grasshoppers, as opposed to crickets. Like we're trying to go for grasshoppers, but anyway, you get the whole body.
Yeah.
If you take the leg, you just end up with like a weird shell looking thing. So yeah, so it wasn't pleasurable at all, and some of them started coming back to life.
Oh no way!
So now you got a leg in your hand and the thing's twitching. And
Well, it was horrible because, according to this article, you put them in the fridge and they, in the freezer, and then their heart stopped. So then you kind of, it wasn't all of them, but there's a couple of them that you kind of felt movement too late, So that was kind of a bit, I mean, maybe I'm being wimpy about it, and you could say, well, if you're going to eat them, deal with the reality of what that involves, woman, you know. But for me, it was a bit, you know, like, oh God, you know, like.
Yeah, but you believed WikiHow. Like, I mean, it's not your fault.
That's what I was saying, right? I was like, this article, you know. So then above that, it was the idea that I think, you know, you're supposed to cook the whole thing. So anyway, we went through this. We didn't do all of them. We ended up, you know, giving some of the other carcass to the chickens, and they were really happy about it. It was like, wow, all of them at once.
Hey.
So yay for them. But the ones we did end up cooking was just literally like the body without the stuff, and it was just like a tiny thing. And at that stage, we'd gone through the process of preparing them, I guess you could say. So the appetite wasn't what it should have been. So then we fried them in butter, and they were fine. You know, the chickeny kind of. It's like
no
crunchy.
garlic.
No, just went for the flat out smother the thing in butter, and you know they were fine. But it wasn't an experience that would ever make me want to do it again. You know, because I think it wasn't done correctly. So
yeah,
that's kind of like what an experiment's about. It's like, you know, learn something, good or bad. I don't know. Your chicken's got a good feed, sorted.
I know, but I kind of wanted it to be like more educational and beneficial as opposed to just flat out
gruesome.
Weird.
That's classic. I actually don't think there's any better way to finish things up. So just before we finish things up and say thanks, what is the best way for people to find out about you, to get hold of you, to go on your workshops, get your books, etc., etc.?
Probably through the website, so ProteinPow.com, and it's ProteinPow on. Sorry, the microphone. It's ProteinPow on Instagram and Facebook and Twitter. We kind of have all the ProteinPows, even Snapchat, but sadly that's not being used enough. But it's there. Unused.
I have another question. When are we going to see a little cute animation of the little chickens and this cricket or grasshopper? I got to see that.
The actual footage of it, you mean?
No, one of your cute animations of like, remember the day we tried, you know?
Yeah, it's just a bittersweet memory, you know. It's bittersweet. It's one of those. Yeah, I mean, I'm thinking about posting the footage, but since it's not like a very positive overall thing, I feel like, should I post this? Will people get a bad idea and never want to do it again and never want to consume any insect containing product because of me who was trying to promote it?
It's all your fault.
So,
yeah, good point. Well, thanks so much. We've had such an amazing chat, and I think you know, and Gareth will definitely agree with me on this. Is like, yeah, you know, you're such an inspiring people for a lot of people. You know, women. And everyone that consumes some form of protein, which is everybody. I think we've definitely learned so much, and we really, really appreciate you coming on, and we can't wait for some of the feedback that we get from our wonderful listeners. And I'd just like to say thanks so much for coming on.
Cool. No, pleasure. Thank you for having me. The first. Oh.
Yeah, it's so awesome. I just want to echo exactly what Craig said. I mean, thanks so much. You know, just for agreeing to it, and also like for being so normal, you know what I mean? Throughout the whole process, you've just been like a ridiculously cool human and and so nice. So we really appreciate that. You've kind of eased us into this, you know what I mean? So it's been very helpful. And yeah, you're a massive inspiration to lots of people, especially women. Like, we didn't really get a chance to go into so much of the things that you've achieved. You know, you've actually done so much stuff. When we were doing your timeline, I was like, wow, how did you even fit all of this stuff in? It's quite incredible. So, you know, hopefully at some point we definitely get you on again and we're able to explore those topics too. But yeah, we're just really thankful that, you know, this has been such a great chat, and we look forward to it. And we're going to have lots of show notes too. We're going to put all this information in there, and we really promote you as much as you can and wish you the best of success. I hope this book launch is massive and really successful for you next year.
Thank you.
Thank you. I mean, we can just I guess say cheers. We'll push stop on Audacity.
Don't forget, so let's click stop there, and on your phone as well, there, Anna.
Oh yeah, that did it all.
Great, guys.
Yo, my man.
How's it, buddy? We did it. High five, Jonah. Yes, that's awesome, man.
Good job, man.
Yes, that was cool, man, wasn't it?
Yeah, it's his first one done and dusted. And it was legend, man.
It was, but